I know you studied birthmarks. That's another area of interest for you.
Yeah, that's, well, actually, birthmarks is the most interesting part of this study of Ian Stevenson. Why? Because this is the biological manifestation of, on a body, of something which is psychic in nature. Because, again, mainstream science cannot explain 60% of the birthmarks. They can explain some birthmarks due to some conditions during the cases, but after that, 60% cannot be accounted. Why some birthmarks, for instance, have very specific shapes. They are in a very specific place. Or why do twin kids, for instance, identical twins, one of them has a birthmark and the other one doesn't have? How does that birthmark has been formed on that specific kid? So why I mention identical twins, because they have exactly the same DNA and it's exactly the same biological code. So why the one code has a variation and the other does not? And why does it have it in the specific place and not in another place? Stevenson figured out that a lot of the people who have memories, a lot of the kids who have memories of their previous life, the birthmarks that they had corresponded to the fatal wounds that they took the very last moment before they died. And he ran, when these former lives were verified, and they found the personality to which the memories belonged, they found also the autopsies that were found in the hospitals and the biopsies and the autopsies of the corpses were exactly the same with the birthmarks. So in other words, we had entering point and exiting point. The bullet in the entering point is small, like my finger, while on the other side, when it comes out, it's 10 times bigger. And they correspond exactly to the autopsy. We have children born with stitches all around the skull. And that stayed till a very later age. And we understand that in the former time, they cut the skull out and they took it out. So we have experimental birthmarks. In Thailand, they do that constantly. They say, for me to recognize you when you come back to this to the next life, they make a very specific birthmark so that they know that this person who will be born in the future is, let's say, Nassos. So they do that in Lebanon as well. So experimental birthmarks are one of the best examples. What they do is they put in very specific odd places, like here, for instance. They can paint this place. When you die, they paint this place or this here, or they do some things on the body, very specific. So when the person is reborn, it comes out with this particular, they know that this is Nassos reincarnated. And I'm saying this, it's evidence of the continuation. We have the same cases in Alaska, in the Tlignit Indians. So we do have such cases in many parts of the world, and they are fascinating. I have had a lot of clients with birthmarks. They are unusually high. I think Stevenson's estimate is very low. I was living in Corfu. Corfu is, you know, a lot of tourists go there because they're beautiful waters and nice sea, and they come. And when the tourists are there, they are dressed less, so you can see more of their body. I would notice hundreds of people with a lot of birthmarks and very, very intense in some cases. Had I had the ability to go there and say, hey, would you like to come for a session? That would be great.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Needs more exploring.
Yeah.
Good. I also know that you practiced some dream healing techniques.
Yes.
Could you tell us more about that?
Well, dream healing is again a practice that was done in antiquity. And in Babylon, in Mesopotamia, in Egypt. But again, the best documentation is in ancient Greece. We have, in Greece there were 320 Asclepions. And an Asclepion had two functions. One is either you went there for surgery, and if you go to Epidorus and see the surgical tools that they have found, they're absolutely identical with the tools that modern medical personnel is using. Of course, they didn't use laser at the time, but the tools that were used till the 80s are exactly the same. Even for women to open the womb and see things, it's exactly the same thing that you go to the doctor and he wants to see. The same thing, you can see it intact in the museum. It's there. So that was the physical, dealing with the physical things and surgery. But there was another part which is far more fascinating and far more interesting, and that is the part of incubation. Now, you know what incubation is. You let something stay in a dormant way for some time, and then it will come out changed. Eggs incubate. Put eggs there in an incubator, and we wait for the little chicken to come out. So that process of incubation, in Greek it's called engymesis, which means within sleeping. What happens within sleeping. What they did is that they prepared themselves, if they had a psychological ailment, they prepared themselves for several days before they walked all their way to go to the Asclepion. So they were fasting. They were abstaining from toxic behavior. Okay, they had to follow a specific diet until they arrived there. Then they had to sacrifice something, a cock for the god, a rooster, and they would send the fumes to the god, and the rest of the people who were working in the Asclepions would eat the roosters and cocks and whatever. After they did this ceremonial thing, they should engage in preparation of the soul. How did they do that? The theater was next door. Massage in the hydro waters. These Asclepions are in the most beautiful places ever. The natural beauty is amazing. And they do have springs and running water. So they would engage in massage, in gymnastics, in athletics, in theater at night, and all this in order to prepare themselves to come to touch with the doctor. The doctor was the priest. It's synonym at the time. The priest was the doctor, also the physician. Now the priests and the physicians are in different. Okay. At that time, they were the same person. That's why they were wearing white robes. Now the doctors today in the hospitals wear white robes because the ancient Greek priests were wearing their white robes. And they are called clinics because what we sit now is a clean that was used in those incubation chambers. That's where the word clinic comes from. Okay? So at that time, what they should do is prepare themselves, and the very last day they would drink only water, nothing for food. And then the doctor would determine whether this person is for incubation, for surgery, or to go home. If he determined that he is for incubation, he had to wear a white robe and enter the premises of the temple. Once they entered the premises of the temple, they started walking in a very long corridor that would lead, dark corridor, to the tholos. The tholos was a round structure with rings. So they would start from the outer ring, and there was always one opening that would allow you to go from the outer ring to the inner ring and further on. It was like a labyrinth, okay? Totally dark and full of snakes.
Why snakes?
Because snake, we have a natural fear of snakes as humans. If I throw you now a snake in front of you, immediately you will jump away and you will fear and your hair will raise. So that was a part of the trick. Why? Because they wanted to use the lesser part of the brain, the reptilian brain. You know, the basic brain, our very basic brain is the reptilian brain. Okay, if you step on a snake, this snake, by the way, was selected and it was non-poisonous, but it was put there for this specific reason, to make your brain work in a safe mode. Okay, you go suddenly in a mode which is not rich, but you go in a mode of total. So then you're easy to be hypnotized. You're easily under. You work in an unconscious manner. Now, they had to go from the outer ring to the inner ring, and then to the inner ring, and then the people who were working in the avaton, the tholos is like a way to prepare themselves, so then they would go to the avaton, which is where the cleaners were, and they would tie them with wraps of cloth, white cloth, and make them like mummies. Like this, they would be trapped like this. They couldn't move their hands and their feet. And then they would slid them into the cleaners. Now, imagine having been through this process, they expected the dream, the honor, as they was called, and the honor was a dream specifically made for you by Asclepios, which would give you the solution to your problem. Another dream would come for my problem. Let's say we had the same problem, heart problem me, heart problem you. The dream would be totally different, and there would be a different solution for me than for you. So that dream was so insightful that we had spontaneous healings during the night. People would go in blind and come in seeing. People would go in deaf and they would come out hearing. People would go in, paralyzed, and they would come out walking. And that was happening 1,000 years before Christ. And it was happening day after day. That's why some people say that, Christ is a copy-paste of Asclepios in terms of stories. Because all these remarkable healings, even resurrection of dead people, were done, and they have been recorded in the years of the Asclepiums. But it's amazing that this is the basic form of psychotherapy. That's the original psychotherapy. That's the real psychotherapy. And these people were very sophisticated for doing such things. And I challenge all of psychotherapists who are listening here in Russia right now, if they know anything about what I'm saying now. I really challenge them. I want them to see to themselves if they really know what was happening in antiquity. And now they go by the Bible of DSM. What a crazy thing. If they had been doing this therapy, their patients would be gone in one day.
Do they practice something like that in Greece now?
No. I do those things and a couple of other guys do it, you know, incognito, in the shadow, yes.
Okay.
No, we don't do it out openly.
Okay.
But we do it.
Yeah.
But it's only a minority.
Sounds amazing.
Yeah, it is. I can tell you.
What's your opinion about progression? We know a lot about regression, but what about progression?
The first time this was ever dealt with was by Colonel Albert de Rosat in France. He was the director of the Institut Polytechnique of Paris. But he was a doctor who was really interested in hypnosis and experimentation. And since he was doing regressions, and his book is 110 years old now, imagine. He was doing regressions at the time, and then said, why not do progression? But he did it in an experimental way. In other words, he was taking servants from houses, he was paying them and hypnotizing them, and trying to see, have a progression and see what will happen in the future. Then he would follow their course of life to see if the progression would work. And what he discovered is that in none of the cases there was a proper guess. I think in one case only 2 events took place. Another person who wrote about progressions was Bruce Goldberg. A very famous book by him in the 80s, Past Lives, Future Lives, I think it was the title. It's provocative and he has interesting stories, but there are stories that cannot be really checked. I personally run in spontaneous progressions in sessions. To check for the truth of those progressions, I recorded them and I deposited them in a notary public. So in case they were correct, then I would publish this and I would provoke the scientists to go to the public notary and take the videotape and check it. But in the 2 cases I did this, it didn't work. The course of the life of these particular persons was totally different. But I had to do it for experimental reasons, and I publicly say so, that I failed, so that, you know, it's the scientists call it the drawer, the case on the drawer where you never bring it into light. I bring it into light, yes, it failed, okay? That doesn't mean that everything will fail.
I personally think this is an open road. I mean, today I decide this and then the future goes like that.
Bravo.
But tomorrow I change my mind.
You can change your mind. So if you change your mind, what happens? You have a different course of things. So.
But what about people like Nostradamus?
Nostradamus is a very peculiar and interesting case because in his time he was considered a very bright scientist, and he spoke a lot of languages, and he was a very well-versed person, and he studied the stars. He was very close to the discovery that the Earth, before Galileo, that the Earth is actually revolving around the sun and not the other way around. But he was threatened by the Inquisition, and he was rather afraid. But the most interesting thing about him was not his discoveries, his supposed prophecies about the future, the long future, today's future, the Third World War, but about Napoleon Bonaparte. And in that area, he made very, very many correct projections, and he talked about the monarch. He talked about his defeat in Waterloo. He talked about the French Revolution, and also an interesting thing about it, and the fall of the kingdom. These things he has predicted correctly. One other thing he had predicted was the fact that his corpse will be unburied at the year of 1789, at the year of the French Revolution. He correctly guessed the death and the way of death of Henry, the King Henry. In those times, in medieval times, they had fights between each other with horses, and they were carrying these things that they were fighting with each other. That's why Nostradamus became very famous when he was still alive, because of this prediction. You know, all of Europe learned that Nostradamus had said that to the king, and the king ignored him. Not only ignored him, he wore a golden casket, and he died with it. I think the future already exists, and I think the future has already been done. I mean, everything is being done simultaneously. We just witness the illusion that we live the now. But where is the now? I mean, if you focus on the now, it's gone. Where is the now? Is it here? But it's already gone. I mean, if you could, now you are filming. Now it's digital, but you remember the old times, it was pieces of pictures, but they ran too fast. Okay, cut them in a place and put them in a stack. Which is now? Where is the now? There is no now. How long is the 1 minute? Einstein said one good thing. They asked him, can you explain to us relativity in simple words? And he said, yes, of course I can. If my wife is sitting on my laps, time seems like an eternity. She feels very heavy. But if a little girl, 18 years old, was sitting on my lap, so you can imagine how this works. Time, for me, is a big enigma. And it's a big question. It seems we can visit past, we can visit the future.
Okay, but we live now. So again, here
make
and
sure
now.
we live now, here now.
Good. Here and now, we are in Russia.
Yep.
Loving to see you here, and I know you teach people here. You teach what you know to do very well. Could you tell me, is there anything about Russian clients that come for regression therapy? Like, do you distinguish us from other clients in any way, mentality or being prepared for regression or whatever?
That's a good question. I never thought of that. Are they different as related, let's say, to other citizens of Europe? Certainly, culture-specific differences are evident. You know, if you work with African people, they have a different approach to life a different philosophy of life, a different understanding of life. So the same thing happens with the Russians. They're culture specific. They have a very specific culture, even though now it has been Americanized. Okay, it seems that the American way of life has really deeply influenced the Russian way of life. But despite this fact, you have a history that I hope you respect. I hope, I say that, and I stress it, and I make it bold, and I underline it. I hope you respect your history, and you bring it into the future. Because if you lose your history, you will lose your future. That's for sure. We Greeks lost our history, and we are losing our future. So there are, but they have to do with cultures. That's all. That's the difference. Not really big difference.
Great, good. Well, looking forward to see you again and again.
Okay, I'm happy to be here.
Please come. Thank you. Do we have anything to say to our Russian audience from your part?
I think I already said it. Respect your history. Respect your culture. Respect your heritage. And be positive. Think positive, and all things will work out. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Athanasios. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Я была счастлива представить вам нашего греческого гостя, очень опытного эксперта в области регрессий. И мы ждем новых интересных гостей у нас в студии. Всего вам доброго.